Martin in Georgia, you're on Skep Talk with Matt and Aron.
Awesome. Nice to meet you guys. So I guess if I can just get started, I don't really know how this works. I've only watched a couple of it. I was gonna just mention, I guess, that my primary argument would be from both like the our inability to understand the probability of there being absolutely nothing in the universe, as well as from a moral why we have moral impetus to certain things.
You broke up for a minute. We couldn't hear the end of that.
I said from our inability to understand absolute nothingness, as well as the fact that we have a moral impetus to, reject murder and rape and things like that.
Okay, let me jump in if I can for just a moment. First of all, there's seemingly a growing number of cosmogonists, at least the ones that I've had the privilege of talking to and reading from, are convinced that there was never a time when there was absolutely nothing. Never. That the universe is in some sense eternal. Even if there was, in models of cosmogony that include a singularity, that singularity is itself something. There was never a time when there was no singularity. The singularity itself may have had a past in like an hourglass kind of a formation of the universe, where it's a big bang, big crunch kind of scenario. It's a different type of oscillation nowadays than what that was. But in general, the consensus is material energy cannot be created or destroyed. A universal wave function continues. The universe is eternal, changes states or changes shape, form from time to time, but it always existed. There was never nothing. In a universe in which there is no God, but there are animals such as we, there would have to be, in any social creature, there would have to be an understanding among animals that you realize that if you're picking a fight, you just might get killed. That's the simplest thing. Live and let live would be a simple requirement, that predators only hunt what they think they can take down, and they don't want to risk anything because they don't have a medical plan. You saw me holding this reticulated python a little bit ago. I have so many snakes that could cause damage to me. They could, but they don't. And if they're comfortable with me, there's no need to do that. I have animals all around me, and all of them exhibit a type of morality. There's a type of compassion. They can tell your feelings to a degree that we can certainly tell theirs. And this is in a universe in which there is no God. This would have to be the case. There's no way around it. If there's a universe that has animals at all, they're going to have to understand this.
I find that fair. I would say one counter, to the first argument from the cosmological perspective, would be I just put it on a probabilistic basis. Simply, even if we had an eternal, universe coming from, at this point, what we understand to be a singularity, I kind of like the how we attribute time, I guess, in our human mind to our observation of entropy and how things moving to a more or less ordered state gives us a perception of time. I would think it's more probabilistic than not that those things can do so based off something putting those things in order, rather than being, I thought of this, or I've heard of this idea of if the universe itself is eternal in nature, and we can accept that, we can think of it as points on a graph or on a paper, and at a point, these points can interact with each other and cause, the expansion that we see that has occurred in the universe based off this decrease in the entropy, or sorry, increase in the entropy of our universe. So if we do see that, we would have to say that something, or there has to be some sort of entity that that permits these eternal things to interact with each other, and like some force has to be behind that.
Okay, so then
Um,
what would a god be, and how could it have anything to do with that?
so I think a god could be just that force, just anything that would allow for, whether the universe is eternal or not, anything that would allow for the individual, we just call it, singularities, or this one singularity, to do something. Anything that any force that gives it the opportunity, if it is eternal in itself, to do something other than just be eternal.
How would whatever a god is allow something to be? Would that mean to not interfere with it and just let it be?
No, I think it requires an interference. Otherwise, whatever
So
eternal
nothing
state
can
that
happen
thing
unless.
was.
So it's not that the god is allowing it; it's the god is making it happen. Nothing can happen
Yes,
because of natural properties. It can only happen because the god is pushing it.
if that is, yes. So in a way, yes. Like, it only
So
could happen if
how would this god, and we still haven't defined what a god is, but how would this god do anything?
by. So I guess that to me, I think of it as, well. I and even though this is, I think, one of the ways we can, like, humans in our small minds, like, we have no scope of what actually, you know occurs to allow what we see in the universe. But if if just the fact that something is being allowed to do something means that there are prior limitations, and I think just the setting of boundaries itself requires something
Well,
outside of the
No,
thing itself.
yeah.
no.
Let's start with
Permitting
that.
something does not mean that there are prior limitations. Permitting something means that you are intentionally not adding limitations. It doesn't tell you whether there's any prior limitations or not.
Yeah. And can we set another parameter?
Meanwhile,
I'm sorry.
I still don't know what the hell God is, or how it permits anything, or why it's required to permit anything. You seem to be
Or
presenting
how
a
it does
problem.
anything.
Yeah, you seem to be presenting a problem that I don't see as a problem, so that you can solve it with something that I don't see as a solution.
Yeah.
So would you say
So
there
then, in
is
another thing
no
that we have to
problem?
look at,
Oh, go
another
ahead.
thing we have to look at when we're talking about a god is, what kind of god, and a favorite atheist argument is, well, which god? But let's cut to the chase on something. Regardless whether a god exists or not, the Bible, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, the Bhagavad Gita, every scripture of every religion is man-made mythology. None of them would be true. None of them. Do you understand that?
Well, I would have. That's where I was trying to go into more of a probabilistic likelihood. Of, if, like, I think that if we establish that it is more like, I think we could also establish which religion is more like true.
How are you
We
calculating
already know.
probabilities for something that you haven't defined, you don't know anything about, and you seem to be calculating probabilities from it? I'd love to see the math on that.
Yeah. So we just want to be clear, just start with, we know that Adam and Eve didn't happen. They're not real. The Exodus evidently never happened either. Tower of Babel is a different story. That literally didn't happen. We know for certain that the global flood did not happen. That all of these stories in Genesis and Exodus and Job, God doesn't store snowballs in storage bins to be brought out in battle situations. I mean, none of this stuff is real. The earth is not flat, despite what the Bible says over and over again. So we know that the Bible is false, even if God exists. You understand that?
So is the Bible a scientific document? I would say no. I think in
Okay, so
history.
you accept
I look at it as more a
you accept at the
historical.
onset the Bible is false, and now you're going to argue for a God anyway.
I
right?
think there's truth in it. So we agree that there's
Well, there
also
was in
truth
Ethiopia.
in it while being false, just like
There was a river called Euphrates, but very little else.
well, I think there's historical truth about it, but like even if we were to, we could make the same, I think, equivalency with like Newton's principle.
Do you understand that
We
Adam
say
and Eve
it is
were not real?
false.
Do you understand that
So
Adam and Eve are not
Eve,
real
I think,
in any sense?
so Adam and Eve were not real in any sense, sure, but I think the concept of man being a some sort, or having some sort of relationship with whatever higher power that we're referring to, that if they did have that kind of relationship, and there was
the reason I brought that up
from that relationship, we could associate that with being, the first people to sin.
Okay, well, we can argue about we can argue about why we don't have a relationship with God later. I just wanted to specify that under no circumstances if you could prove that a God exists, it would not save the Bible. The Bible's done. The Bible's false. Doesn't matter. You could disprove evolution. You could disprove evolution tomorrow. The Bible was already disproved yesterday, and there's no bringing it back. So do you have an argument for God that has nothing to do with the Bible?
Well, yeah, that's where I was beginning with. I didn't try to incorporate the Bible into my original claims about the universe, morality, but I would say I think we could agree, right, that like we more likely than not as human beings, like for example, evolved from like Australopithecus to say, but we do not. You say based on the evidences that we have, it's more probable than not. We don't have the specific intermediary organisms that led us to human beings. But
we actually have an awful lot of that.
The genomics, and we have a good large amount, but I would say
Anthropus platypus, for example. But that wasn't the point I was trying to make. We don't, whether there was a God or not. Okay, first of all, it doesn't change evolution. It doesn't have any effect on evolution. It doesn't require that the universe start from nothing. It does not save the Bible or the Quran or any of the other sacred scriptures. All of that is just that, fantasy, folklore, myths, and legends. That's it. God doesn't require morality. Why would it?
Well,
you have to think.
That's where I was trying to establish this.
Try not to think in terms of in all of the galaxy. We've got just this one planet and this one solar system and this one outward arm of this one galaxy, and in just this one 500-mile diameter circle out in the desert somewhere, we've got all these stories happening, and that only occur in this brief period of time. And you're going to base your God on that. If the God was real, it would be bigger than that circle. It wouldn't be a God of Middle Eastern Jews. It wouldn't be a God of Arabs. It would be a God of everywhere.
To be fair, Aron, I've never heard Martin say anything at all about advocating for the biblical God.
I know. So what I'm saying is that if there was a God that created the universe, it wouldn't be the God of the Jews. It wouldn't be the God of Arabs.
Don't know. You don't know if he's advocating for that God.
I know that. I'm trying to say outside of that. So if we're going to talk about God being concerned about morality, but this is one God that governs over all of these worlds, all of these galaxies. It's not going to be a requirement that there's any kind of punishment, any kind of damnation, any kind of thing that's associated with that typically in most folklore for how we treat each other. That God could be completely apathetic.
Okay, yeah. Is it okay? I would say to that point, I think there, and I've heard you argue against this, and well as that, but um, that I don't see how you can object to there being like this non-subjective morality. And I know certain claims about objective morality I disagree with, but I think on uh, certain levels of human being, we do have this sense that there is some sort of moral truth in, like, just in the fabric of our
Entirely societal.
I would I think I would disagree, and I think most people just
Okay, then
from the
show
general
me the
nature.
evidence. You said I was rejecting something. You said I was rejecting something objective. So show me the objective thing, because I already described early on why in a universe without a God we would have to have morality. All animals, and particularly all social animals, would have to have a morality in order to exist. And you're telling me I'm ignoring something. What am I ignoring?
Well, I don't think all organisms and all you have morality. I think it's only specific humans.
Social animals. Why doesn't your dog kill and eat you?
Well, I don't think the dog finds value in it. Like, and I wouldn't, but I
Okay.
would say that's not the same thing.
How
for
do you know
humans.
you're
I
right?
think we don't.
How
base
do you know
our
you're right?
conduct on a value
No.
system.
Stop. You don't. When Aron brings up something about how other social animals have mores, ethics, behaviors, other great apes, we have observed them objecting to things not being fair. All of those things are a moral sense of some point. The fact that you don't think your dog has a moral sense is not an argument or evidence. It's not even in any way explaining why your dog acts as if it understands the difference between right and wrong, as dogs do. Your dog knows when it's been a bad boy and when it's been a good boy. To just assert that you don't believe it, okay, cool, you don't believe it. You didn't explain anything. You didn't provide any evidence for anything. You didn't find any way to knock anything down. And still, we skipped past a bunch of stuff to even allow this to continue, because you talked about a God being that thing which serves as a grounding for whatever you're going to talk about. And then you just assume that it's something that you can or should or would have a relationship with. Even if such a thing existed, even if there existed some foundational thing that serves as a grounding for logic or morality or the foundations of morality, that doesn't mean that you would ever have any relationship with it. You are taking speculation, multiplying it many times over, and then injecting all of the shit that has nothing to do with it. If there's a foundation for reality, prove that it's a thinking agent. Prove that it cares about a relationship with us. You don't get to assume any of that stuff, just like you don't get to assume that because you don't think your dog knows about morality, that all of a sudden it doesn't know the difference between a good dog and a bad dog.
That God.
That's very fair.
That God. Now, as far as people having a
I
relationship with God, there's a whole lot of people who think they have a relationship with God. George Harrison of the Beatles famously said that he had a personal relationship with Lord Krishna. Not only did that he could pray to him and believe that Lord Krishna was hearing him, but that he could see Lord Krishna and hear him, that they had two-way conversations. This is George Harrison and Lord Krishna having two-way conversations in the same room where he can see each other. There's a guy that lives a mile down the street from me who he worships Bast, the cat-headed goddess, because she showed up in his house and met him. She appeared in his house, physically manifest, and bade him to become her disciple, which of course he did, because she went through the trouble of showing up. And it's like this woman was canvassing for her campaign, a political campaign. She shows up on my doorstep and meets me, introduced me, tells me about her platform and everything, and I voted for her. Much the same thing when a god shows up in your house and you get to physically meet that god. Okay, that's interesting, especially when it's kind of hard to fake what she is because she has the head of a cat. That's kind of convincing.
That's pretty funny. So, Martin, can we narrow down so that we're not bouncing around between 20 different potential God arguments or statements to what God, because you called in to say that it's more likely that there's a God than not. You haven't told us anything at all about how anyone could possibly calculate any of this stuff. And we haven't defined a God. We haven't shown any sort of demonstration of calculation of probability, just kind of a guesstimate about probability. And then, I mean, doesn't matter what anybody pushes back on. I still don't know what God you think is probable or why, which is a difficult place to be in when that's the subject we're supposed to be talking about.
Right. So I guess I could try to get into this. And I would say I think one of the things that I would ask you guys, your opinion on it, I would say, like, could we agree maybe that there is likely a 50-50 chance that there would be either absolute nothing or absolute something? Like, just in a general, like, if you were to flip a coin to say something would be there.
No, I'm not going to agree. When I ask you how you've calculated the likelihood of things, I'm not going to agree that there's a 50-50 shot of nothing or something. The fact that there are two options, doesn't mean that I'm still fucking talking. The fact that there are two options does not mean that the odds of either option is 50%. So what's your case that it's 50-50?
Would you agree that there's a 50-50 chance that between Matt and I that one of us is from Earth and the other one is a Martian?
Well, but I think that comes with a presupposition that, like, you have parents, that you've existed, we never observed life on Mars. Like, we always have those, like, preconceived understanding.
And so why would you bring up
at that level, on that level of being, I think, just the universe, I think we would say, like, our only understanding would be that there's either supposed to be nothing or something. And I would say that those are the only two options. And I think
let's imagine there's only, I can accept there's either nothing or there's something. There's something. So there's not nothing.
Yeah.
Chance of something.
Has there ever been nothing? Has there ever been nothing? Is there anything that you can point to, any time where there's ever been a nothing? How do you know nothing is even an option?
Well, I would say, based on our understanding of the universe, I would say, like, I would say the same thing about quarks and electrons and their states. I would say that they, like, we observe a universe that is just two opposing entities in general.
Martin. The fact that you can point to other examples where there are two opposing entities does not mean that nothing is possible. The question was, do you have any way to demonstrate that nothing has ever been at any point in time in any way at all? How do you know that nothing how do you know that nothing is an option? You don't get to point to quarks and say, well, it has a counterpart, so evidently everything must have a counterpart. That is a fallacy. Do you have some way to show that nothing is and should be considered an option?
And I think the interesting answer to this question is I don't. And I think the fact that I don't gives us, it's more likely than not that that either, we have something that's eternal in nature, that nothing has never existed. So therefore we all agree
There was never a time when there was nothing. The universe was not created, therefore we didn't need a creator, so there is no creator. So that's part of God gone right there. You haven't defined what a God is other than, we have to assume maybe you were talking about a creator because you said it was determined by whether there was nothing, but there was no nothing. So that part of your argument is gone. We have morality, whether there's a God or not, so that part of your argument is gone. It's more likely than not that you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, what's just happened here is that you've blathered on about possibilities that you can't demonstrate or won't demonstrate. And when I point out what the problems are, now when you admit that you don't have any way to demonstrate that nothing should be considered an option, your response was to say you find that very interesting, that because the fact that you don't have an answer to that question, therefore means it's more likely that something is eternal, and therefore that eternal thing is God. The plural of anecdote isn't data, and what you are doing is multiplying your fallacies to reach the conclusion you fucking want. Not the one that's there.
I didn't say that because there's something at all in our existence that there's
only
God.
because Aron interrupted you. Okay, only because Aron interrupted you. You said the fact that you didn't have any way to demonstrate that nothing was an option made it more likely than not that something is eternal, which is false. It's absolutely false. Whether or not you can demonstrate that that nothing is possible doesn't tell you at all about whether or not something eternal is more likely or not. That is absolutely a logically flawed argument. So you went with, oh man, I can't answer Matt's question, but that makes my proposition even more likely, which is absolutely flawed reasoning, start to finish. Is there anything that you can demonstrate? And do you have any objectively verifiable evidence to support that would lead us to your thing that you called in about, that a God is more probable than not?
If you are saying, to understand you correctly, if my understanding is correct, you're saying that there is the fact that we have existed, the fact that there is something, doesn't have anything to do with the probability that there could be nothing. And even though we have something, that something does not need to be trusted. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, Martin, okay. You're not understanding because you didn't fucking listen. I didn't say anything about what the probabilities are. I asked you questions about what you could demonstrate. And when you admitted that you couldn't demonstrate them, you then tried to extrapolate that into something else. I didn't make any statements about what is possible or probable. What I did was point out your logical fallacies. And the fact that you then try to sit here and say, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. The only words that should have come out of your mouth is, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. You're saying my arguments are fallacious because that's what I did.
Yep.
Okay.
Another way to put that is you don't have an argument.
Probability.
And you don't have anything to discuss probability with.
Hang on. Did you tell the call screener that you want to argue that it's more likely there's a God than not?
Yes. I was.
How do you?
I was talking in reference to
that's a yes or no. That's a yes or no question. How on earth do you make a case that something is more likely without talking about probability?
Well, I was more so responding to your rejection of why I haven't demonstrated the probability.
How do you make a case that something is more likely than not without talking about probability? That was my question.
So, okay, I will go back into that direction, but why I wanted to actually
answer my question.
To establish something.
Now, answer my question at a meta level without caring about your argument at all. How do you make a demonstration that X is more likely than not without talking about probability? More likely is the colloquial for probability. You're saying X is more probable than not, X is more likely than not, and then you want to say, well, I didn't call in to talk about probability.
Oh, no, I think I did not wish that, no, that was not what I was trying to say. I apologize. I was more so only referring to I was talking just to establish how to reach, the probability that I was referring to. And I
Wait,
and I
did you
don't
just
know
say
where to begin
probability
because
after
it
saying
seems
you
like,
didn't call in to talk about probability?
oh no, I absolutely called in to talk about probability.
Oh my fucking God.
Sorry, can I clarify myself? Just give me like 30
No, I
seconds.
You
don't think
can,
you
but
can.
clarify
you
what I
can,
was
but
saying.
you're now only talking to Aron because I'm playing chess.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you
Okay.
can.
So
Matt asked you a handful of clear yes or no questions that, had you answered them with a yes or no, that would have clarified your position. You couldn't answer
no,
any
no. Ask
yes
me
or no
again. I
question with a
apologize.
yes
I
or
missed
no.
that.
No.
What was the yes or no question, please?
No. I'm not redoing all the fucking work because you couldn't pay attention and then listen to the question that you were asked. I sit here patiently listening to you for a long fucking time. It is not, I don't, why should myself and all the listeners, matter of fact, we're going to hang up. And if you want to know what the question is, you can go back and rewatch the show. And then when you figure out what the questions are, you can call back sometime. But I'm not rehashing the entire last 30 minutes of the shut up. I'm not rehashing the entire last 30 minutes of this show just because you can't be bothered to pay attention to the show you called into.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
have a good
I
night, Martin.
sincerely apologize. I thought I did answer the question. I just wanted to say, like,
No,
yes,
you didn't.
expound.
Yeah, no, you didn't.
I believe I
If you
did.
thought
I
you
did
answered,
say
if you
yes. I
thought you
called in
answered
for
the question, if you thought you answered the question, don't ever fucking call me again because you are too stupid for me to engage with, or too dishonest. One of the two. You're either a liar or you're too stupid. Which one is it? Because we just
I
established
believe I'm too
that you
stupid
wanted us to
because
ask
I
this
genuinely
again.
do not know
I don't care.
where I messed up.
I know you don't, and yet you think you're sitting here saying you don't think you did. So, whichever the
You
answer
took
is,
the option.
I'm done with you.
Yeah.
You are a waste
Okay.
of my fucking time and my audience's time.
Yep. So, if there are any other theists frustrated with this performance and think you can do better, call in.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and I only became a woodworker for the puns. That's not important. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on our Patreon or as a channel member, and you can actually support specific shows and specific hosts in special tiers on those. Check those options out. Also, you can leave a super thanks and get a little highlighted deal. But if all else fails, you can always you can subscribe and leave a comment. Now, here are some suggestions because I don't care about the algorithm. I am the algorithm. Bye.